You ever think the people closest to you are the ones who will never hurt you? I used to believe that. I thought my brother was my ally, my blood. Turns out he was the one who stabbed me in the back the hardest. It started small. A joke here, a secret there, nothing that screamed betrayal. But beneath the surface, the cracks were already forming. I remember the night it all blew up. The night I found out not only had he betrayed me, he had taken everything I thought was sacred and twisted it against me. See, this isn't just a story about cheating or lies. It's about trust shattered in the most brutal way, by the person you'd least expect. When you're betrayed by a stranger, it stings. But when it's your own blood, that kind of pain doesn't heal, it festers. I'll tell you everything. How I uncovered the truth, piece by piece. How the betrayal changed me. And how, after all that, I still had to decide who I wanted to be. Because in the end, the story isn't just about what happened to me. It's about how I survived. It's a cold truth. Betrayal by blood runs deeper than any other. I never thought my brother would be the one to break the unspoken code between us. Growing up, we were inseparable, like two halves of the same soul. We shared everything, secrets, dreams, even that stupid old baseball glove Dad gave us. But beneath that brotherhood, there was a shadow I didn't see coming. It started with small lies, little things he'd say when he thought I wasn't paying attention. At first, I shrugged them off. Everyone lies sometimes, right? But then the lies became plans. Plans that didn't include me. I began noticing things missing. Money, opportunities, respect from people I cared about. And every time I confronted him, he smiled like nothing was wrong. That smile? It was poison. One night, everything came crashing down. I found messages on his phone, not just talking behind my back, but actively working against me, against everything we built together. He wasn't just betraying me. He was trying to take everything. And worse, he wanted me to never see it coming. I felt like I was drowning in a nightmare, one where the person holding me underwater was supposed to save me. We stood face to face in that dimly lit room, the weight of years and lies pressing down like a stone. I asked him, why? Not expecting an answer, but I needed to hear it anyway. His eyes didn't flinch. He said, because you were weak. Because I was tired of carrying you. That hit harder than any punch. It wasn't just betrayal of trust. It was a brutal dismissal of our entire history. But the worst part? I realized then that the real fight wasn't with him. It was within me. Do I let this break me, or do I rise above the wreckage? I chose to fight. Not for him, not for revenge, but for myself. That night, I lay awake, replaying every memory, every laugh, every fight we'd had. I questioned everything. Was our bond ever real? Was I just fooling myself all along? But then I thought about my own reflection, about the man I wanted to be. Not the broken victim, but the one who stands tall, scars and all. Healing wasn't going to be easy. Trust shattered. But life doesn't wait for us to feel ready. So I started rebuilding, piece by piece, not just my life, but my identity. I learned to set boundaries, hard ones. I surrounded myself with people who lifted me, not tore me down. And slowly, the fog began to clear. But even as I grew stronger, there was always a part of me watching my back. Because betrayal like that doesn't just disappear, it leaves a shadow. I stepped back into the world cautiously, the sting of betrayal still fresh, but my eyes wide open. I found solace in the small things, a morning run, the quiet hum of the city waking up, the laughter of friends who truly cared. Yet every so often, that shadow loomed. A sudden doubt, a flash of anger, memories that hit like a freight train. One afternoon, I got a call, not from my brother, but from someone I thought was gone. It was a test, a reminder that the past doesn't always stay buried. But this time, I didn't falter. I answered on my terms, with strength I didn't know I had. Because surviving betrayal isn't about forgetting. It's about choosing to live on your own terms. I started to rebuild trust, not in others right away, but in myself. I realized that betrayal isn't just about what others do. It's about how you respond. It's about reclaiming your power even when everything inside you screams to give up. I took long walks alone, listened to my thoughts without judgment, and slowly learned to forgive, not him, not for what he did, but for me. Because holding on to anger was like drinking poison, hoping he'd suffer. Forgiveness wasn't about weakness. It was my way back to peace. And peace was something I hadn't felt in years. It was during those quiet moments alone that I finally confronted the deepest wound, the betrayal of family. How do you heal when the knife comes from your own blood? I realized the answer wasn't revenge nor bitterness. It was acceptance. Accepting that some people won't be who you hoped they'd be. Accepting that your story doesn't have to be defined by their actions. I chose to write a new chapter, one where I was the hero, not because I forgot the past, but because I refused to be a prisoner of it. The road ahead wasn't easy. There were setbacks, moments of doubt, nights filled with loneliness. But each day I grew stronger, because survival isn't about never falling. It's about rising every time you do. I remember the first time I tried to explain what happened to a close friend. The words felt like glass shards in my mouth. How do you put betrayal into sentences without breaking apart? She listened without judgment, just nodded, letting me pour out the pain I'd carried alone for too long. That conversation was a turning point. I realized healing wasn't a solo journey. It was about connection, about finding those who would stand with me, not behind me, not ahead, but right beside me. But even as I opened up, there were moments when anger bubbled up again. When I'd see my brother's face in a crowd or hear his name in a conversation, the pain would flood back. I fought hard not to let it consume me. Instead, I focused on building a life that wasn't defined by his betrayal. And slowly, the world began to feel less like a trap and more like a place where I could breathe, where I could hope again, where I could be free. This is the story of betrayal, but it's also the story of survival, of a man who was broken and chose to become whole again. One of the hardest lessons I had to learn was about trust. Not just trusting others, but trusting myself again. After being betrayed by my own brother, every relationship felt fragile. Every word, every gesture, I analyzed for hidden meaning. Was this genuine, or another lie waiting to happen? I pushed people away, fearing they'd hurt me too. But slowly I realized that building walls only isolated me further. True strength came from opening up, carefully, yes, but opening nonetheless. I started small, trusted a few close friends with my story, let them in, and found that vulnerability wasn't weakness. It was courage. It wasn't easy. Some days, old wounds bled again. But every time I chose to trust, I chipped away at the pain. I rebuilt myself piece by piece, not who I was before, but who I wanted to become. And in that process, I found something unexpected. Hope. Hope that one day, The past wouldn't define me. Hope that I could love and be loved again. Rebuilding trust wasn't just about others. It was about forgiving myself. I blamed myself for a long time. Wondered if I missed the signs, if I was naive, if I was weak. But the truth is, betrayal isn't a reflection of your worth. It's a reflection of the other person's choices. Once I accepted that, the weight started to lift. I learned to speak my truth, to set boundaries that protected my peace, and to refuse toxic patterns in my life. It wasn't easy. Every step forward came with its own battle. But I was no longer running from my pain. I was facing it head on. And as I faced it, I found my voice. A voice that said, I am more than what happened to me. I am worthy of love and respect. I will not let betrayal define my future. That voice grew stronger every day. And with it, so did I. There was a moment, a quiet one, when I realized I was no longer defined by his betrayal. I was rebuilding my life on my own terms. Not because the past was erased, but because I refused to carry it like a chain. I started pursuing things I loved. I reconnected with old friends. I took risks, small ones at first, and allowed myself to hope again. And then, unexpectedly, I met someone. Someone who didn't know my past, but saw me for who I was. That was terrifying, because letting someone in means risking pain again. But it also means allowing yourself the chance to heal fully. I took a leap, and in that leap, I found not just love, but forgiveness. Forgiveness for him. Forgiveness for myself. That's when I truly started to feel free. The path to healing was never straight. There were setbacks, doubts, and moments when the old wounds felt fresh again. But with every step forward, I learned to trust the process, to be patient with myself, to celebrate the small victories. I stopped looking back with anger. Instead, I looked forward with purpose. I found strength in my vulnerability, in sharing my story with others who felt broken and realizing none of us are alone. My betrayal became a catalyst, not for destruction, but for transformation. I'm still learning, still growing, but I'm no longer defined by what happened. I am defined by how I chose to rise. Thank you for listening to my story. If you're going through betrayal, know this: you can survive. You can heal. You can be whole again.